Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It now gives me immense pleasure to introduce to you the Hon Di Farmer MP, Minister for Employment and Small Business and Minister for Training and Skills Development, to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Estella, and I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we gather today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I grew up on Bailey country, which is around Gladstone. I want to acknowledge Estella. In fact, can we give a big clap to Estella, because she's actually pretty amazing, isn't she? Thank you, Estella. To Brett Hugsma, who's the Regional Director of South East Region for my department, and to our panellists, Dr Chris Davis, Nicholas Lindsay, Nathan Burns and Shay Chalmers. And to all of you, I see some people I already know quite well in the audience here, and it's really lovely to be down here. I think Estella asked me, she got into my diary quite some months ago, as Estella does, and you never say no to Estella anyway, do you? But just so keen to see what was going on down here. I've been a very frequent visitor to the Gold Coast, and in fact I was just talking to Hilary there from the Southern Gold Coast Chamber and Jason from Destination Gold Coast when there were so many challenges for the border businesses, and together we worked together, trying to work out what the best solutions were. I think sometimes I was on the phone to Hilary at like 12 o'clock at night. It was a difficult situation, but because we worked in partnership, we were able to come up with some potential solutions that could actually make a difference. And it's always struck me that on the Gold Coast, that you are extremely good at partnerships. You're extremely good at working together. And I was looking at the guest list today from the businesses, from the training sector, from education. I know there are some councillors here today, but there is such a cross-section of people who are doing important things on the Gold Coast and have got an investment here. The fact that you are working together to look at where the opportunities are for the Gold Coast, that's going to be the clincher. And I can say to you, I travel all across Queensland regularly, and there are some great examples of communities who work together, but they all have their different kind of strengths. And I think, you know, not every region has what you have here. And Estella's just been talking to me about the work that you've all been doing on the Regional Jobs Committee, how well that's going, how engaged everyone has been. Fantastic to have schools involved in this, and the connection. I think we're all seeing that very importantly now, the connection with schools and the future of industry is absolutely critical. So, so congratulations to all of you. It's just really quite a privilege to be here, and I'm so looking forward to the panel today. So I just wanted to talk to you. I've got 5 minutes, and I was thinking about, you know, what were the most important things that I could talk to you about in that 5-minute period. And I want to talk about workforce, and wherever I am going across Queensland, labour shortages, skilled and unskilled, are absolutely the key issue. I'm seeing lots of nods here, and it doesn't matter what region we're talking about, it doesn't matter what sector we're talking about, it is absolutely a critical issue. And, you know, we're hearing lots of stories about businesses now that we're through that really intense period of COVID, businesses absolutely booming and growing, but feeling constrained because of staff shortages. And in Queensland itself, which is amazing to think about, when just over 2 years ago we were just going into COVID and looking at potential catastrophe from a health and economic point of view. Amazingly, Queensland is going gangbusters. Our economy is growing at about 6 or 7 times the rate of the national average. The opportunity ahead of us is absolutely enormous, but we have got to address that issue of labour shortages if we are going to take maximum advantage of that. And some of you in this audience were at the Workforce Summit, which I held a couple of months ago. We're the first state to take the bull by the horns, not to say we can solve all of those issues because we know it's a global issue, but that we have to actually do something about it. And we will be releasing our workforce strategy, which came out of that summit. Over 350 people, and Estella was there at that summit, to look at what are some things that that we need to do to really change the way we think about the way we operate. And the school to work transition, how we invest in skills and training. We spend about $1.2 billion in skills and training in Queensland. Are we doing that the right way for the skills we're going to need in the future? What sort of people are we employing now? Because the ones we're used to employing, they're not there anymore. They're already in jobs, and even if you get them, they might get poached tomorrow. The sort of workplaces that employers are actually operating from, and what are our emerging industries. And I know that you've already done a lot of work around what your emerging industries are in the Gold Coast, and it's really important to know that if that's what's coming at you, that you've got a skills and training system behind you that is going to mean you've got a workforce ready for it. We know in Queensland we are going to have an additional 280,000 jobs going. Now, if you think I'm going to say in 2035 or in some time ahead, you're wrong. That's in 3 years' time, 280,000 jobs. So we've got to make sure we're filling demand now and doing the best we can, but also in the future. But one of the absolutely key things that we've found in all of our consultation and the work from the summit is that solutions have to be place-based. So what you're seeing on the Gold Coast, where your demand is going to be, where your opportunities are going to be, who the players are here, what your universities are offering here, and I acknowledge Carolyn Evans here, what your schools are doing, what your relationships are, what's happening on the Gold Coast here is different to what's happening in Mackay. It's different to what's happening in the northwest around Mount Isa. It's different to what's happening on the Darling Downs. So it has to be people working together to look at your local priorities. And so the regional jobs committees, as you know, we've got 9 of them across the state, and we chose the Gold Coast to be one of those 9, not only because the need's there, but the potential is there. And the fact that we have all of you willing and able to work so closely together. So to actually support you with the right data to know what's ahead of you, and to support you with a structure like the Regional Jobs Committee, where we're paying someone to actually do that coordinating work. And I know the rest of you on the committee are volunteers, so thank you very much for that. But it's that coordinating approach, that is the way we are actually going to absolutely bloom on the Gold Coast and across Queensland. And I just want to say, please keep it coming. We need to be able to hold up really good work. Once you've identified the way you want to move forward, we want to support you in doing that. So when you see the workforce strategy, you will see that it is very much about places, regions, you telling us what you need, and how do we actually work through that to make sure you're able to do your best. So looking forward to seeing all of those, looking forward to hearing the panel today and having conversations with many of you. And please invite me down on a regular basis because I'm so excited about what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, and we're excited for the way forward. So at this stage, we're going to now enjoy our second course. So and following that, we'll be back to present on the Regional Jobs Committee report. Thank you. Dan's a project consultant for the RJC for the Gold Coast and has worked alongside us to develop the report, which we're about to present. Thanks, Dan. Have you got a microphone? Okay, so the Leaders of Industry Lunch, thank you very much for attending. And this is a report that we have just completed after doing the RJC for the Gold Coast. And this was about creating the jobs of today and the future, improving training pathways and driving economic activity on the Gold Coast. Today's agenda is we're going to give you a bit of an overview of Queensland and the Gold Coast, the economy in relation to jobs, and we're going to do a bit of a reflection on the past year. We'll give you an overview of who and what the RJC is on the Gold Coast, a lot about the projects and some of our key findings. Now, there is a lot of information that we will be giving today, but don't worry, because this will be uploaded onto our webpage, and our webpage will be shown at the end of this report. So, Queensland. As the Minister has announced, the unemployment rate is at an nearly 14-year low. However, our workforce is going to increase by 10.9%, which is about 124,300 people in the next 2 years. By 2025, as the Minister announced, we will have at least 280,000 more workers, and these will be predominantly in hydrogen and renewables, biomedical and creative and design. The Olympics are offering us some opportunities, and we will see high value end jobs come through the Olympics, and it should create $8.1 billion in economic benefits and at least 9,000 new jobs. And where will these jobs be? There's a lot of jobs going to be in the digital and technology skills, and it's a rapidly growing area with 126,000 workers. And 1 in 4 jobs will be in the digital and IT world by 2025. In the Queensland state economy, it's estimated by 2025, 3.6 billion will be in the renewable workforce, and these will be high-skilled jobs. So, the Gold Coast. What are the market drivers for the Gold Coast? It's certainly been the effects of the government stimulus. Our lifestyle has pulled a lot of people up here. There has been a demographic shift. People are now working from home, fly in, fly out, part-time, and of course the Great Resignation. So people who are going, I'm working, I'm going to have actually resigned. We've had a lot of resignations through the COVID period. And we're price competitive compared to the capital city markets. We have a lack of supply relative to the elevated demand. However, and we've got interest rates, but the recent migration, interstate migration, we've had 40,600 people that have left New South Wales, 17,300 that have left Victoria, and we've had 41,000 people come to Queensland. On the residential markets, our home values rose by 25%, that's nationally. Regional market growths were stronger than capital city markets, and home values firmed at a greater rate than apartments, and rents rose by at least 11.8% nationally. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Stella. Just to confirm, unemployment rate is ridiculously low at the moment. I just read this morning that in May nationally there were 500,000 empty jobs at the moment, so obviously very low and predicted to go even lower. So I thought we'd just reflect on the last year, because it's pretty easy just to keep moving forward, but with the RJC starting in July this time last year, it's been a really challenging, topsy-turvy year, quite dynamic. So this time last year we were responding to COVID restrictions, still a lot of people at home. We had borders closed, as in the Queensland borders, and we had no or limited international migration. As the borders lifted in, I think it was October or November last year, we started to see people coming back to the state. We started to get COVID, and we started to see people not being able to get to work because of COVID or because they were close contacts. And then over the last couple of months, it seems like we've had some influenza-affected staff as well. So all of this has led to, amongst other issues, worker shortages, which most people in this room can attest to, and record low unemployment. That has also been compounded by supply chain issues as a result of global issues, and as Stella pointed out, we've got low rental availability and difficulty to either rent or buy properties. So The last year has been quite dynamic. As a regional jobs committee, it's been important to be as agile as possible to respond to the changing circumstances as they've arisen, and we'll talk about that now.
A little bit of background about RJCs. As I said, it's about creating the jobs of today and the future and improving training pathways. They're funded by the Queensland Government, Department of Training, Employment and Small Business. Thank you, Minister Farmer. They were established in 2019. There are 9 Queensland RJCs. I think for us, the value of it is that the RJCs can develop their own action plans which respond to the region's needs. So what we run here on the Gold Coast will be very different to what other areas would run, because they're responding to whatever their nuances are. Our project was written up in 3 different phases. And the first phase was a mapping exercise to look at all the training and employment skill agencies that were delivering on the ground here on the Gold Coast. The second one was to do the jobs of today. So it was all around hospitality and tourism, because that was the most affected at that stage, and we had to look at what we can enact upon and what can happen and what we can utilise in order to help that sector. And the third one is about jobs of tomorrow. So working with our key sectors, and the key sectors we have here are advanced manufacturing, the biomedical technologies, Industry 4.0 and ICT, space, aerospace and defence, and marine. So we actually got all those entities into a round table in separate groupings, and then we sat down and asked them a lot of questions. And
that's right, a lot of people in those roundtables are here today.
Yep.
So just to give you a chronology of the last year, obviously in July we formed the Regional Jobs Committee. We then did the context analysis review, which the Minister referred to, and I'll show you that in a sec. Over Christmas we looked at hospitality, and then over the last few months we've been sitting down with industry to understand what's going on at the coalface. And here we are today at the Leaders' Lunch. Okay,
we don't do it alone, we have a committee. So we have the Gold Coast Regional Jobs Committee. This committee is made up of all those different sectors, and at every one of our tables I have a committee representative that has been working and supporting us. Could they all please take a quick stand so we can recognise you? Thank you. Big hand, thank you. These people are volunteers. They give of their time freely and have been an amazing source of advice and information.
Probably worth noting on that also is the representation has been quite strategic and represents both government at all levels, but also different sectors, as we'll discuss in a minute. So this, at the start of the process in July or August last year, the first point of call really was to understand what was going on in the sector and who's doing what and who's responsible. So we tried to define or develop the ecosystem of who's responsible, and this is what we ended up with in terms of what's going on at a federal, state level, what's the role of employers, etc. So I won't go through it, just the point is it's been a valuable exercise for the RJC in understanding who does what and who to speak to under certain circumstances.
Right. So the next stage we did was tourism and hospitality, and a bit of background. The tourism and hospitality will continue to be the mainstay of the Gold Coast economy. And this industry is it's not a surprise, has been severely impacted upon by COVID in 2021. However, in pre-COVID times, tourism accounted for over 40,000 jobs, sales approaching over 10 billion, value-add contribution to the Gold Coast economy of 5 billion, and it contributes 15% of the Gold Coast economy. It also accounts for approximately 30% of Queensland's tourism and hospitality sector. So it's safe to say that the Gold Coast visitor and hospitality sector punches well above its weight.
So it's an important sector, and when it was impacted heavily by COVID over the last couple of years due to restrictions, 1 in 3 staff will let go from the sector, which is obviously quite crippling, and nearly or over half of the tourism expenditure just dried up. But what we found is as the borders opened and as tourism came back, all of a sudden there were thousands of jobs unfilled. So the people that had been available to work in the sector were no longer there or no longer able. So what we'd found is that at the beginning of the pandemic, people, migrants and international students had left. People in the sector had sought and gone to other sectors and considered that there was more job security in other sectors as well. So as the tourism sector comes back, we'll have to look at how we can encourage people to come back to the sector and enable it to grow. Some of the things that we looked at in terms of delivering a workforce at the time were some recommendations, and these were based on a short, medium, long term, recognising that at the time it was quite a big problem for the sector, and it's something that's going to need to be responded to over time. Some of the initiatives included existing programs that have been quite successful, like the Work in Paradise program up in Cairns, which looks to attract, and we were looking to extend that to the Gold Coast. Short-term opportunities around enabling migrants to do more than 20 hours and move that to 40, which has been quite successful. And in the long term, we've had some success, well, hopefully we'll have some success in looking at potentially enabling different cohorts like mature-aged people to come back into the workforce without being penalised. And I note that the new federal government is looking at that only this week and have identified that that could have up to 400,000 people enter the workforce if that was deemed appropriate.
Okay, then we looked at the jobs of tomorrow. Dan.
Yes, sorry. In early this year, we started to look at, so if we consider things like construction and tourism to be, education to be the pillars of the city's economy traditionally, but with efforts to continue to diversify the economy and grow emerging sectors. Sectors like advanced manufacturing, biomedical, Industry 4.0, ICT, space and defence and marine are critical sectors that offer enormous opportunity to diversify the city's economy. So what we did over the last few months is we sat down with leaders in those sectors, people at the coalface who are employing people every day, and as opposed to waiting for ABS data or other sources of information, we went straight to the source to say, well, and I've got the questions which I'll talk about.
Are you?
And basically the questions that we were asking people and trying to understand what are the issues now and what might be the solutions. So are you able to access staff? What are the types of worker shortfalls that you have? How many do you consider that you'll have in the medium, short and long term? And what's your strategy as an organisation or as a sector to respond to this over in the future?
And the skills requirements that they might need moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first sector was the Industry 4.0 and the ICT. RDA Gold Coast had ran two projects, and one was the Industry 4.0 Business and Investment Program, project I should say, and the other one was the Biomedical Supply Chain Project. Under the Industry 4.0, it was identified that the Gold Coast has Industry 4.0 capability and sector-leading organisations. It's experiencing amazing rapid growth of 126 workers, and by 2025, one in four jobs, as I mentioned earlier, will be in the digital and ICT. The reason for this is COVID has fast-tracked the digital technology adoption, and conventional supply chains have also been now moved to become digital supply chains. In fact, about a month ago, we ran the very first digital supply chain webinar to look at transitioning people from the traditional supply chain into a digital supply chain workforce. Skills and workforce for Industry 4.0 are a constraint. However, they also presented an opportunity for the city and its training sector, and that came out of that project and out of the workshops.
So in conversation with industry, some of the issues that were identified was a general lack of awareness of the maturity of the sector for the Gold Coast, which we think is an opportunity to respond to. Issues like people being able to live on the Gold Coast but work remotely and what we're calling the reverse brain drain. And so we're not 100% sure yet what that means from an economic development perspective, but it's definitely worth considering. And concepts around the commercialisation ideas or being able to attract capital to make these things a reality. So some of the things we're looking at is continuing to build the city's reputation around this sector, jumping on existing programs again, which have been successful, like Advanced Queensland Knowledge Transfer Partnership, and continuing to build partnerships with organisations like Microsoft, Griffith University and Coders Dojo, which we've done this year.
And there's some sample vacancies that were highlighted throughout the workshops. The next one was the biomedical technologies. Over the past several years, the Gold Coast has experienced exponential growth in emerging industries. And one of the fastest growing emerging industry on the Gold Coast is the biomedical technology industry. Now, there are two segments to the Gold Coast emerging biotechnology industries. There's the pharmaceuticals and the biotechnology, which includes examples of, discovery and development of new drugs and new vaccines, and the medical technologies. Now, these include, for example, in vitro diagnostics and digital health. It's importantly, both these segments of the biomedical technology industry rely upon sophisticated supply chain that traverses a number of sectors, including Industry 4.0. The exponential growth of one technology segment enables that couldn't have been anticipated is in just 5 years. The exponential growth of one technology segment enables that couldn't have been anticipated just 5 years ago is that of clinical trials. And you'll see that clinical trials underpins the pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. It also underpins the medical technologies. The Gold Coast has the largest, I love this one. The Gold Coast is the largest regional city in the country for the delivery of clinical trials. It is experiencing growth of 32% at the moment. And the rate of growth over the next 5 years will far exceed the national average, in line with it being an emerging industry. All the direct jobs created are typically high-value knowledge jobs, and they contribute substantially to our economy. So each direct job generates a value add to the Gold Coast of over $150,000, and by 2029, the employment in clinical trials is expected to generate $33.1 million per year to the Gold Coast economy.
So, yeah, some of the issues, or not so much issues, but certainly opportunities, were around leveraging off the existing capability in the sector and potentially taking a longer-term strategy for the sector and positioning the city, not just nationally, but in APAC as a leader in biomedical. Part of that would also include establishing mentorships for people in leadership roles, not just within Australia, but again in APAC, and that's probably something we'll talk a little bit further with Chris in the next session.
Yep, definitely. Advanced manufacturing. This is exciting. It's exciting times on the Gold Coast. Advanced manufacturing, or manufacturing, is the third largest sector on the Gold Coast, and it contributes $2.7 billion in value add. And it's grown 22% over the last 5 years. It is exciting times to be in manufacturing on the Gold Coast. It has a total output of $8.3 billion, and in 2021, the Gold Coast had 2,860 businesses in manufacturing. And some 2.5 years ago, when I was talking about manufacturing on the Gold Coast, we had 14,000 in manufacturing employed. So it is a substantial growth industry. Yep, you can see all the figures, so I won't go through them.
Yeah, so again, definitely shortages in workforce being attracted to manufacturing, and that's definitely something we'll talk about with Shay in a second. And I think one of the critical parts there is that manufacturing not being seen as a career pathway. And I think one of the opportunities for us is to continue to build the relationship between the vocational education training sector and industry as well. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, space, aerospace and defence. Now, this is a pretty exciting field to be in. Our state's space industry already employs over 3,000 full-time equivalent positions. It generates $760 million per year through core industry services like satellite communications. Queensland has the capability and location to develop the space industry with the potential to contribute between $3.5 to $6 billion to the economy by 2036. $15 million have been invested in a new military space capabilities with Gilmore Space Technology, and we'll be interested to hear Nick talk about that a bit later. Australian Space Agency and industries to develop the supply the sovereign space surveillance and mission system. Conservatively, Queensland Defence Industries employ more than 6,500 people. We can't get up the latest figures on this, but it generated an estimated $6.3 billion in revenue between 15 and 16.
So obviously space is a huge opportunity, and there's been some really big announcements recently about the Gold Coast playing a pretty significant role going forward. But again, as we're going to talk about in a minute, there are still difficulties in attracting people in certain roles, not just necessarily engineering roles, but general trade roles as well. One of the opportunities we're looking at here is if the city is going to play a big role in space manufacturing, is there an opportunity for TAFE and universities and to have bespoke programs focused on that as well?
Marine industry. The Gold Coast boating industry is estimated at $33 million. $11 million is currently being invested into the city's marine trades campus, and the city is headquarters to over 450 marine companies, and worldwide, again, we're punching above its weight. And the latest figures is the projection to 2025 of the marine industry says that total employment for the Gold Coast will be 3,380 people. The amazing amount of output value by 2025 will be $846 million. The value of exports for the Gold Coast is $460 million. Places like Maritima and Riviera have delivery time waits on some models of 3 to 5 years currently.
Yeah, and so this is a real problem for the sector. So that's restricting growth, restricting money getting out the door. We're in discussion with representatives from the marine sector. We identified about 20 to 30% shortfall, and I suppose opportunities around potentially encouraging other people into the sector. We had very low female representation currently, but again, like the manufacturing sector, there's the opportunity to highlight the career pathways, that there's all sorts of trade roles, there's design roles, and I think that's going to be one of the opportunities around that sector.
Yep. So to summarise, our key issues are, Dan?
And so I think it's important to present this. So at the start, we started with, well, what's gone on in the last year? It's been a pretty dynamic year, and I think that everything pointing forward is probably going to be another fairly interesting year. Looks like we've got rising wages, rising interest rates. We have these emerging sectors. We've also going to get a lot more domestic and international migration. So under these circumstances, the kinds of issues that we've identified is significant shortages in workforce. It's not just a Gold Coast issue, it's a national and a global issue in some cases. There's a lot of movement between different organisations, and that's because employees can move between, knowing that they can potentially get more money, and then there's opportunity for how we look at the career pathways and how we potentially represent those. One of the things I think that this is a really long-term thing and something that won't be solved overnight is the connection between industry and what's being taught. And it's a very difficult time for this to occur because of the advancement in technology. But I think it's something that the Gold Coast needs to try. And obviously, how do we continue to try and get underrepresented cohorts of people back into the workforce? And I think that that'll be a critical part as well as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the potential solutions, I think Dan's spoken to a number of them, is that tripartite relationship between the education sector, manufacturing and the schools or the students. It's about a lot of companies are now looking at internally upskilling, growing their own. Skill migrants, well, that's been well received. Integrated work learning has been an interesting one that has came out, and we've been discussing this with a number of universities. Micro-credentials was a big one that that industry felt that may be a good way forward for them. The Gateway to Industry program, school industry mentoring, and a Dharma, but that's going to be a long-term solution. and responding to increasing women in non-traditional industries. And I'd just like to do a bit of a shout out on this one. We have Amanda here, Amanda from Awesome Women in Construction. Amanda, if you just want to take a big stand up for us. Amanda is just amazing. So she's running the Awesome Women in Construction. It's about getting women into non-traditional roles, engineering, construction, all facets of construction. And next Thursday is launching an app for called Be Ready. Yes. Thank you. And that's working with high school students and females and giving them access to what that career could look like, who do they engage with, what do they need to study, what is the job role, does it fit them? So well done you. I can't wait to see that come out. Tech Girls and Coda, yeah, give her a hand. It's amazing. We've been working closely with Tech Girls, Coda Dojos, and for that I've been working with Suzanne Osborne. Suzanne, take a stand please, wherever you are. Suzanne's been absolutely phenomenal. She works with Griffith University and she's absolutely been running with this one. And we will be rolling out the Tech Girls with a local school in the third term. And this is about engaging young girls into the tech and IT world. It seems like young females start the world in school, working in tech and IT, but by the time they get to high school, there's only a 10% stay rate on it. So we're now looking at trying to increase that and working through Tech Girls and Coda Dojos to do that. Makers Empire is another, thank you Suzanne, that's brilliant, thank you so much. Suzanne's also been responsible for us linking with Microsoft and to look at internships and look at some programs that we can run here. But also is Glenn English here? Yep. Okay, Glenn. I spoke with Glenn. He's running the Australian Industry Trade College. Thank you, Glenn, and we'll be working closely with you. That sounds like an amazing college as well. So there's been some positive outcomes in this project. Dan, future.
Sorry. So yeah, I think some of the future priorities, and the reason I highlighted is that we're going into a well, potentially, I suppose we don't know what's going on over the next year, but I think we can all agree there's probably going to be challenging potentially. So what we've tried to do is look at priorities that, regardless of the context or the climate that we're in, make sense. So I think one of the big ones is going to be how do we continue to market the city, both in terms of the great sectors that we have, but the great opportunities that we have for the workforce. As we said, continue to build better connections between industry and the training sector, encourage underrepresented cohorts back into the workforce, and continue to do what we can to support those sectors and promote the value of sectors doing great work on the Gold Coast. And I think obviously skilled migration has to be an enormous piece of the puzzle, and how we encourage people to come here and help us out.
And taking the story of the Gold Coast and making it the smart city, we are an incredible smart city. We have massive manufacturing industries. We have state-of-the-art buildings and organisations, and it's about now focusing the Gold Coast as being a smart city. And it's also about, it's about attraction, retention and growing our own, especially to our high school students. They don't actually realise that they can work on space programs, super yachts, Formula One racing cars, right here on the Gold Coast. So we now need to start talking that up, and we now need to start really working on a targeted approach with the high schools, with the universities, with the training organisations to really try and embed that into our students for the time moving forward. Thank you. And I think that's the end of our presentation. Yeah, thank you very much. Right, I'm going to ask Dan to stay on because Dan's actually going to be the moderator of our panel session. This is the exciting part. So I'd first like to introduce and welcome Shay Chalmers. Thank you, Shay. Shay is one of Australia's most renowned manufacturing industry experts, engineering consultants and a keynote speaker with cross-sector and global experience spanning a wide range of manufacturing environments, from steel to medical devices. Shay is recognised by Engineers Australia as one of their engineering executives and is a sought-after industry advisor and leader. Her commitment to raising the industry's profile is demonstrated in her role as non-executive of QMI, as well as various boards, advisory and committee position. Shay owns and directs Strategic Engineering Australia, and her experience enables her to intimately understand the entire manufacturing ecosystem. I might add that Shay is also a committee member of the Gold Coast RJC and is also on the Regional Development Australia Board. Welcome, Shay. Thank you. The next is Chris Davis, Dr. Chris Davis. Chris is the General Manager, Institute of Glycomics at Griffith University on the Gold Coast. Chris obtained an honours degree and a PhD in synthetic, medicinal chemistry from Griffith University, and for 2 years he worked in biotechnology startup companies developing antibacterial drug candidates he co-invented during his PhD. In 2009, he returned to Griffith University as General Manager of the Institute of Glycomics, where he currently leads a group of professionals dedicated to the strategic and operational development with experience in naval aviation, UAV design and operations, and the Naval Air System Command Program Executive Office. His civilian experience includes 10 years at SpaceX with the world's leading rocket company. In 2009, Nick joined SpaceX as the propulsion test engineer, responsible for the development, qualification and acceptance testing of the Draco and Super Draco engines used in the cargo and Crew Dragon spacecraft. It's incredible to have him on the Gold Coast. Nick earned a Bachelor of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the United States Naval Academy and an MBA from the University of Texas. Nick joined Gilmore Space Team in 2019, where he has served as Head of Manufacturing, Program Management for Launch Vehicles, and currently serves as Chief of Staff. Thanks, Nick. Nathan Burns is the founder and CEO of Blockchain Collective, an education company that creates emerging technology curriculum with accredited courses such as the Diploma of Applied Blockchain, Diploma of Blockchain Merging Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence, and Applied Advanced Diploma of Blockchain, as well as technical short courses designed to develop the skills of future technology workforce. He also maintains active roles in a variety of companies across software development, fintech, blockchain and decentralised banking. Nathan advises and has an interest in a number of startups. And I hand you over now to Dan as moderator. Thank you.
Thanks, Estella. Well, that's quite a panel. Can we get a round of applause before we start? Okay, so we've been talking, for a long time we've talked about the traditional pillars of tourism and construction on the Gold Coast, and we're starting to see the maturity of these new and emerging sectors arrive. Could I get them up, start with you, Shay, to just to start talking about the maturity of the manufacturing sector in your instance on the Gold Coast and what you're expecting in the future?
Thanks, Dan. There was a lot of stats that were thrown at us just now, but I just wanted to take a second and think about one of the stats that was up there. The manufacturing industry on the Gold Coast is delivering $8 billion worth of product every year, and $4 billion of that is getting exported. And just to put that into perspective, we're up at about the $20 billion for the state and about $16 billion export for the state, give or take. So thinking about that from a Gold Coast perspective, that is massive. $4 billion worth of Gold Coast manufactured products are getting exported to the world. Now, I think that just speaks volumes about the size and complexity of the sector that we have here on the coast. And a lot of the challenges that you spoke about is what we're hearing from manufacturers. It's really about they've got the orders and they want to scale, but there are some challenges to do so. So lack of skills is one of the biggest challenges that we're having. Also lack of space. That's one of the challenges that we have on the coast, is that designated space, strategic space for manufacturing growth we don't necessarily have enough of it down here. So those are probably the two things that we're hearing, but it's certainly not lack of orders, that's for sure.
and we might talk a little bit about COVID stuff for manufacturing in Australia in a minute. But Chris, did you want to just explain for people in the room who aren't aware of what's going on in the biomedical space on the Gold Coast?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think the reason why a lot of the people in the room probably don't understand the industry is because if we go back 2 decades, sounds like a long time, but if we go back to the year 2000, there was no biomedical technology industry on the Gold Coast at all. I know this from personal experience, started a PhD back at that time, and out of that PhD actually didn't have a lot of places to go. There weren't a lot of jobs in that industry. If we fast forward to today, I'm really pleased to say that out of the Gold Coast, this is quite remarkable, but Gold Coast researchers have invented the world's first drug for viral-induced arthritis. It's available to patients now as of 2021. It's been commercialised by an Australian-listed company, and that's all been driven out of here, out of the Gold Coast. The invention came out of our Gold Coast laboratories. That's just to put into context for you that we've come from a zero industry just 2 decades ago to an industry today where we're actually inventing and developing our own drugs and vaccines. What's really important though, I think, Dan, is what's underpinning that, the entire supply chain that is at this point in time still maturing on the Gold Coast, but is developing quite quickly. I know Evelyn Terralongo's in the room. Clinical trials is an absolute key component of pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and also the medtech industry, where we need clinical trials to actually validate and prove up those technologies before they're available on market. But also, and this is really key, I think, from an infrastructure perspective, is the vision of the Queensland Government at this point in time around the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct and their vision to establish the enabling infrastructure we need there to continue to drive the biomedical technology industry. So these are just a couple of things to begin with.
Yeah, that's perfect, Chris. I think what we're hearing here is these sectors are growing and considered to continue to grow over. Nick, talking about growth sectors, there's obviously been a lot of positive announcements over the last year for space on the Gold Coast. For those uninitiated, do you want to take us through those quickly?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure I can cover all of them, but the long story short is that we've seen an explosion in the support for space, not just in the Gold Coast and in Queensland, but across Australia in general. So 3 years ago when I moved here from the US, there either wasn't a space agency or it was very much in its infancy. There was not a space force, and those two major changes has shown the shift from the federal government in space as a priority. So fortunately, our founder, Adam Gilmore, saw that coming and was one step ahead of the game. We now have a 33-ton orbital launch vehicle sitting in a shed in Helensvale right now, getting ready for launch either later this year or early next year. So yeah, we're ready to go.
And I think one of the interesting parts, especially around the federal government funding, has not just been what will happen with Gilmore, but the attraction of other organisations as well.
That's it. Yeah, we don't consider our suppliers real suppliers. We consider them technology development partners. So we want to work with them to take their technology and advance it to the point that it's been to space, potentially successfully returned from space, and now they're a space qualified supplier for anyone in the world, really.
Thanks. And Nathan, I first heard you talk at the ICT forum last month, and I was fascinated by your journey in blockchain. Do you want to talk a little bit about your company and what you see coming in the future?
Sure. Thank you. So, so we started the blockchain journey back in 2017, and we came from the industry side of things. So we weren't an educator by any means. I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to write curriculum or anything like that. But what we realised is we were starting a blockchain company. We got bad advice. There's a big gap in the market. And that gap in the market's being seen across every industry by the sounds of it and by everything we've seen today. But what we saw is there was no standards at all, because when you talk about emerging technologies, they're emerging, there's no expectation that there's a benchmark or a standard to be measured against. And we took it upon ourselves to solve our own problem first as an industry like body, as a company, to see if we could create a benchmark, because there was nothing around the whole world. So we actually created the world's first advanced diploma of applied blockchain, which is the business application of blockchain, not the technical side. And then that's evolved into now a diploma of applied blockchain, and then we've since recently got approved the diploma of applied blockchain merging machine learning and AI. And where this goes from our perspective is the way business is evolving is it's rapid, and the emerging tech sector generally, all the emerging technologies, when you talk AI, Internet of Things, and all of these connected devices, Web3, Web4, is all looking through, what we have to start looking at is business models through the lens of use of emerging technologies, not just bringing legacy business forward, because legacy business caused the problems we have today, but not necessarily solving the ones we're going into. And so if we can look to the future and start building businesses integrating emerging technologies, then half of the problems that we face around skills shortage and gaps, a lot of this stuff is going to get automated out anyway to some degree, and people's capabilities, creativity and skills can be applied to then the area where machines, computers and systems can't process. So we get better business, better creativity, more fulfilling roles, because let's face it, no one wants to do hamster wheel type operations. So so it's been fun, and every day is a new day, and there's a lot going on.
Thanks, Nathan. So I think we've established that there's serious growth in these sectors, but this is the Regional Jobs Committee event, so let's talk about jobs. I might start with you, Nick, because I know you're in the market at the moment for all sorts of people. Can you describe to us the challenges that you're having in terms of accessing the people that you need to continue the trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. So I might just mention, so we've recently passed the 150 full-time employee mark. We have about 155. Carly will give me the exact number if she knows it. Nailed it, good. We have currently 50 open jobs on our website alone. Behind the scenes, we're contemplating adding another 50 on top of that. We're just not ready to flood the team with resumes at this moment. We just can't get enough capable individuals into the team. And I want to emphasize that we don't necessarily need space experience. We have enough space experience on our leadership team that we can bring in really highly motivated individuals who want to do something greater than themselves with their career, with their life, and we can upskill them in whatever the technical aspect is. Like, we have enough critical mass at our company now that if you have some fundamental welding skills, but you have the right attitude, culture, desire to work really hard, we are happy to have you in the door, and we'll teach you the more maybe specific welding skills that are involved with welding a rocket together.
Yeah, thanks. And Shay, we've had many because it's the same kind of issues in the manufacturing sector, and we've had some conversations about how manufacturing will support just not the jobs now, but how do we get the workforce of the future as well?
It's such a complex problem that we have, and fundamentally one of the things we've been struggling with in manufacturing is that perception around it being dirty, dull and dangerous. It's a little bit different in space. That's pretty sexy, Nick, so you guys don't have that problem, but you've still got a challenge with getting the right people into those positions. But first and foremost for us, it's about showing our young people that this is a really exciting pathway, that it's a career journey, and that they will be moving throughout their career, and manufacturing can actually be quite an adventure. One of the other things that I think we need to do too is look inward to ourselves as businesses. Some of the challenges that were outlined in that presentation are around people moving and losing that skill set. And I think that's an old school mentality that we need to cut away. Jobs will change, people will change, careers will change. The next generation will move through 8 different careers. So we need to design our organisations to be agile and adaptable, to expect people to leave. We want them to move on, we want them to grow, and we want them to have an exciting career. And I know that that's a selfless approach, and it can be very challenging in business, but we need to set up the structures and the systems and processes to help them to fly. And so I think holding on to that old adage of, we've trained them, I've invested in them, therefore I own them, is just not going to serve us in the future. So that's one of the things that I think. But when it comes to school pipeline programs too, I do a lot of work in this space because I really believe it's a strong foundation. It only takes one experience with a young person to get them passionate about something. So getting them out into industry, showing them what blockchain is, showing them what space is. Like, I've taken a few people through Gilmore, and you guys are awesome at opening your doors just because a young person was interested. So I think as humans, we can help to connect those in our networks, our friends' kids, our colleagues' kids, and help them to get into industry. Sometimes it's just about making that human connection, and we just as individuals can do a lot to connect young people into work as well.
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things that came up over the last year was some innovative approaches that companies are taking to attracting people and almost developing relationships with potential workforce, not just always putting out the seek employment. We've got a job, but almost developing relationships in advance. Which kind of seems like a really important element, so that when the jobs do pop up, you've got people ready to go. So, Chris, we've had a heap of different interesting conversations around almost at a different level, like the leadership role and the opportunity to catalyse the sector. I assume this is in the ICT sector too, Nathan. The opportunity to build people's skill sets and enable them to take ideas and commercialise those ideas, which is obviously a critical opportunity from an economic development perspective, and then kicking out new companies as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, the example I just gave where, the Gold Coast can hang its hat now on the fact that it has invented a drug and taken that right the way through to now being available to patients in Australia. It's quite a remarkable achievement, but I guess within that and underlying that is, what are the steps taken and what's the supply chain and the skill sets and the personnel required to actually deliver that? And that's a really important piece, because in that particular example, and I think for a big part, this is the way Australian technology often goes, is that we can develop, and we're really good at developing early technology, but then we see it going offshore. How can we develop great technology and keep it here in Australia for longer? And I think that's something that we're really focused on here. We know that we can develop early stage technology, but how do we then build a workforce that's actually capable of taking that technology from those early stages through clinical development? Obviously, ultimately, when we go to market, these are global products, and so in a lot of cases, we do have to partner globally to make to bring those to market. But at least the development of those technologies, taking them through to a later stage here on the Gold Coast, is something that's key. And so within that, then there are opportunities for technology developers. I'm not talking about academic research and development staff here. I'm talking about people that can understand what it means to take an early stage technology and develop it through the manufacturing, regulatory and other preclinical development pathways with the view to take that into human clinical testing, with the view to take that ultimately to market. So definitely technology developers, and I know that applies to others here on the panel. But the other thing too, and something that's probably often overlooked, is that to bring all that together, those C-suite professionals, CEOs, COOs, and others in that realm, we don't have a big pool of those people here at the moment. I would like to acknowledge, though, that the great role that, and I can see Ariana sitting here now, Ariana, Ben Howe, what they're doing out of cohort to actually help train young aspiring companies and help train those new CEOs and COOs of tomorrow in driving those companies through. Things like that are going to help develop that. And there are other ways too where we can actually really foster the development of CEOs and COOs and other C-suite professionals here on the Gold Coast to make sure that we have enough personnel to help drive those technologies through those early stage development phases.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose we should talk about the different strategies that you organise. You've got workforce shortages. What strategies as organisations or sectors, I might start with you, Nathan, do you see going forward that need to be employed to attract the workforce that you're going to need?
Let's see. I knew that was going to happen. Prepare. Bring someone like him along and you're right. So what we're looking at across the tech sector is more than our own issues. So we obviously, we look to solve our problem first, but we also have other companies offshore and whatnot, which are growing pretty fast. And as a result of scaling up our own companies, so like, for example, we've got a software development company in the Philippines, and that's now about 180 staff. And part of our issue we had was the same thing: recruitment, upskilling, getting people job ready. So we've refined the pipeline there, and now what I'm doing is leveraging the pipeline and the infrastructure we've built to give people job skills, and then replicating it here so we can scale and train up more than our own needs. We don't actually need a great deal of people personally for our company. The industry needs, and the tech industry and ICT sector needs skills. So we can solve a bigger, broader problem than our own, because I think sometimes what happens is we get stuck in the vertical that we're working in. So we look at our own company's problems, or we might look at our own niche within the industry's problem, but very seldom do we take a step back and say, well, how many other people have got exactly the same problem? What if we build a pipeline that's more lateral instead of vertical, and we can solve the problem of all the industry sector for skill shortage around tech and job placement and job readiness? And then that becomes a collaboration then with universities, colleges, schools. So even what we're working on at the moment is getting some of our accredited and not accredited courses, getting the QCE points, which is basically so it can get into high schools and become a subject at high school and count towards graduation. Because if we can reach down into grade 10, 11, 12, then we start filling that pipeline earlier. We can get more women into the space because as Stella mentioned before, I believe that 10% of the women keep going in these spaces, but they've got all the talent in the world. It's just that they lose interest somewhere along the line. And sometimes that's just about what you mentioned before about having that human touch, connecting with them earlier and saying, hey, there's a very clear path for you. You're great at this. You would fit right in, and giving a bit of confidence and building people up. And to the same point of oversupply of needs is not service your own need, not just worry about yourself. Be selfless. We've lost so many trainers for our courses, like where initially we had them employed and we lost them all, and we lost them to startups and other ventures, and every single time it's happened we're so grateful because that's an outcome of actually a result to us. And then the last thing, and I'm hogging the mic now, is the entrepreneurs get overlooked. And I think in order to fill jobs you need businesses. In order to have businesses you need entrepreneurs. In order to increase the number of entrepreneurs, you need to create supportive environments around that. All of the jobs only come as a result of having businesses to go to. And so I've been an entrepreneur, I've ridden the highs and lows of it, and it's a journey I'll be on for the rest of my life. I consider myself unemployable. Like even I have a hard time sometimes showing up to my own role, right? But the thing is we create stuff because entrepreneurs will go and break the mold, and we need more entrepreneurs. So don't be shy if you don't fit or you find people that don't fit. They're probably the entrepreneur that just needs a push. Support it, and then we'll have more businesses, we'll have more people. Easy.
Thanks, Nathan. And Nick, so what's Gilmore's strategy for, you've got plenty to do, but you need more people to help you on the journey?
Yeah, that's right. We've actually talked about this quite a bit lately. I mean, I think I totally agree with what Nathan was saying about creating awareness that these opportunities exist very early on, as early as possible. I still talk to members of government that should know that Gilmore Space is serious and has real hardware on the floor, and it's not until they walk into the factory and look at a massive rocket on the floor that they go, oh my gosh, this is real. And it's like, well, yes, we've been telling you that. So if we have that much trouble with adults, trying to get through to a kid in Australia that the space industry that they've seen in the US is right here at home and they can be a part of it, and they don't necessarily have to be an aerospace engineer. We have aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, name all the flavors of engineer, and then spill into the rest of the business. I have an amazing human resources team, I have an amazing corporate operations team, the finance team is awesome. We just need hardworking, amazing people to be a part of the journey. So that's number one, is the awareness. And then now, how do we get creative if people are aware to encourage them to the point that they're willing to put even just get their resume into the bucket? Because some of the feedback we've received lately is that our job position descriptions are intimidating. And so we've gone back to the drawing board and scratched out all of the Cert 4 in whatever the thing is, and really back to the fundamentals. We want a hardworking individual who is self-motivated, shows up to work on time, and delivers results when they're handed a shit sandwich. Those are the people that we need, and I genuinely don't really care what their background is to an extent, right? We need fundamental capability, and we can take it from there.
I think marketing of capability on the Gold Coast and promotion of pathways is something that just continues to come up all the time. Chris, what about the biomedical sector in terms of attracting the staff and workforce that we need?
Yeah, maybe I'll just speak about the Institute for Glycomics and our approach that we've taken, particularly to building those technology development skills here on the Gold Coast. So what our approach has been is to really train traditional academic research and developers in the commercial side of research and development. So how do you actually take a technology out of the laboratory and develop that through the manufacturing pathway, through regulatory, and ultimately to the clinic. And so the whole idea there, and coming back to your point, Shane, also Nathan, teaching unselfishly these people so they can go off and thrive, because one day we're going to get them back. And it's those people that are really keen and ambitious to take on something that's quite a little bit outside of their role today. They're the people that are going to come back and actually really help build the ecosystem. So our approach really is to try and educate in commercial technology development over and above your traditional academic R&D. So we've got that pipeline of technology developers that we can source here on the Gold Coast. The other two is how do we bring younger people along the pathway, particularly around entrepreneurism, and how do we educate and motivate them in that space? And we absolutely do that. We make sure that we bring our I wouldn't say they're younger staff or less mature staff, because they're at the management level now, but how do you educate them in the opportunity to potentially be outside the university in a startup and take an opportunity to drive a venture like that, perhaps with university technology. But that's kind of the way we're thinking now, is how can we take the next step and really think entrepreneurially about those C-suite professionals and how to develop them and promote them.
Okay. Shay, I know you put a lot of thought into this every day.
I do, too much thought. There's so much going on. We mentioned the Gateway to Industry Schools program, which is another DESBERT program, and so that has a number of different sectors that it tackles, advanced manufacturing being one of them. And through that program, I'm one of the directors of the Queensland Manufacturing Institute who looks after the Gateway program for advanced manufacturing. We've got 50 schools across the state, and those schools have agreed to embed manufacturing in their curriculum. So we've talked a little bit about that, about the QCE points associated with the manufacturing, with certificates, but we have those actually manufacturing certificates within schools that the kids can co-study in ATAR. They can be heading down a tertiary path or a vocational path in parallel now. So that's a new thing that ATAR has brought to the table. So you can have not decided in grade 10, and that's okay, and be studying a Cert 2 in manufacturing technology, as well as doing your physics and chemistry if you think you might want to do engineering, or you might want to proceed down the apprenticeship path. You can do both of those. So we're seeing actually quite a good increase in manufacturing pipeline through those programs. We're also seeing within industry setting up training academies, which is actually pretty cool. In some of our manufacturing, we've got a lot of skills shortages in metal fabrication, particularly machining, welding, those kinds of things. And so we're seeing businesses, and it's this altruistic view, right? It's this, I'm not doing it for me, but I know that there's a problem for my industry. We've got a manufacturer out in Toowoomba that set up a skills academy to pipeline skills into the industry for the region. So yes, it helps them, and yes, they get the cream of the crop out of their skills academy, but they're also supporting all the businesses around. But it's kind of like changing that mindset to say, right, I know I need the skills, and instead of poaching from old mate Bob down the road and we get into a wage war with each other, how do we raise the tide together and really create a bigger pool to bring from? So those are a couple of things that I'm seeing. Personally, I work with a lot of not-for-profits and do a lot of recruitment, and I've changed the way in which I recruit. I came from corporate land, and we have a very structured process, and there's all these ridiculous hoops that you make people jump through. And I just actually don't see the value in that. Nowadays, when I recruit, I have a quick 15-minute phone call and I introduce myself. I introduce what the company's about, what the purpose is, what the role is, and what we're really looking for, what the salary expectations are, what the culture's like, and really advertise the role and the position to the person and say, does this sound like it's going to be a good fit for you? Does this align with your values, with what you want to achieve in your life? Because if so, let's move forward. If not, it's okay for you to bow out now if you don't think it's going to work. So I think that more human approach, really, rather than being like, you need to tick my boxes to come into my company, it's more, I value you as a person, and how can I contribute to your life goals?
Wow, okay. That sounds like a really good place to finish it off. Thanks, Shay. Look, I know we'd all love to sit here and talk all day, but I know we've got to keep moving. Can we, we'll wrap it up there. Can we just give Shay, Chris, Nick and Nathan a round of applause, please? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, nice. Cheers.
Thanks, guys. That's brilliant. Well done. I'd also like to thank Dan for the job of moderator, but let's give them all a big round of applause. That was brilliant. Great work. Now, I'd like to again invite the Minister back to the stage to get her thoughts on what we've discussed today and maybe her expectations for ongoing work for RJCs. Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Estella. Well, aside from feeling like an incredible underachiever after hearing that panel, I found that whole conversation incredibly interesting and exciting and insightful. And first, I want to just thank Estella and Dan for that presentation on the work of the RJC. I mean, it possibly, I don't know whether it was a bit daunting having me coming down here, and that's like their report card for the 12-month report card for the RJC, and 10 out of 10 if I was the teacher doing the scorecard. So well done. I mean, we and Carolyn Evans and I from Griffith have this conversation a number of times. You cannot move forward unless you know what you've got. You've actually got to have some information from which you move forward. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. So that was great to have that really detailed profile, and perhaps even some of those findings actually surprise some people about where the opportunities are. And I think it was Dan who talked about, the Gold Coast potentially being known. You talk about tourism and construction, and you've got a list of sectors here which perhaps mightn't have come up on the top 5 if any people in this room had wanted to think about those. And so I think it's really important to really be very clear on who you are and who you could be going forward. But I think what the couple of real insights I got here was the willingness to just turn things on their head and even having a conversation which is about that. And as I travel across the state and people are talking to me about how desperate they are for workers, and about conscious that there are so many emerging industries but don't even know what they all are, the conversation I have most frequently is, you can't actually think the way you've been thinking anymore. If you keep doing what you've been doing and expecting things to change, then you will miss out. And the whole message from today is that we are actually turning things over and standing on our heads and thinking differently. And so whether you are an employer, whether you're a peak body, whether you're an educator, to actually confront that and put yourself outside of where you are and who you are now, that is key, and we've got to do it if we are going to take those opportunities. So we talked about skilling, and we didn't necessarily talk about that traditional pathway of going to TAFE or going to uni. We talked about job-ready skills. We talked about upskilling and cross-skilling. We talked about micro-credentials. We talked about relationships between university and industry, or vocational education and industry. We talked about schools, and I know there are people from the education system here. If I had $1 for every person who said to me to solve their worker shortages, oh, we're just going to go into the schools and we're going to get those kids, I'd be a billionaire, I can tell you. And the poor schools, meanwhile, have got a crowded curriculum and possibly don't understand very much about industry. The fact that you are lifting that up here and saying, okay, we're not all going to crowd the schools, we are actually going to do this in a systematic and organised way, and we are in it as a long game for what we want to achieve. Again, really fantastic thinking. That employer piece about about actually being an employer of value, that you are thinking about what you need to do, not about that employee. And we have a really good working relationship with Seek, who they have 12.5 million people using their app every single day. So the level of granularity over what they can tell us about who applies for what jobs, where they come from, what jobs they've had, where they're going, who they are, what their qualifications are, is quite stunning. And they've said to us that all things being equal, and you know, if you're going to be offered 100 grand more than you are now, then you know you're possibly going to take that regardless. But the values of the employer are the number one reason that they will go to a job or stay in a job. And the majority of people who leave after 3 months in a job, within 3 months, are because of the values of the organisation. So that has to actually be reflected in the way you recruit as well, and about the sort of employee that you need to be. And that was the conversation that was here today. So I think also just that, seeing there was something in the RJC presentation about being a place that people want to go to. I'll tell you, if you shared this conversation today with potential employees and you could articulate what an exciting place the Gold Coast is. You know, we've got the knowledge precinct, but there is so much exciting work going on here that some people have never even heard of, and that's your badge, that's your brand. So you've got everything here, and I tell you, I'm just walking away just really just on the balls of my feet, thinking, oh, I just can't wait to see what you're going to be doing over the next couple of years, which actually leads me back to the RJC and just how important it is, because you've got, just even in this room alone, the collective knowledge, the willingness to be different, to shake the tree. Just here alone, the potential is amazing, let alone right across the Gold Coast, and that collective commitment to doing that. You know, I think it's just so important that we've got this way of connecting everybody. So look, lots of other thoughts, but I think you've created an ecosystem here which is very important, and I want to say congratulations to every single one of you, and please keep doing what you're doing and share it. Share it. We've got to share it because we've all got to move forward. So thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to actually hop in the car and head off now, but just an absolutely wonderful event. Thank you so much.